When a movie changes cinema forever, it doesn't just inspire, it sparks a stampede of imitators. And when Star Wars hit in 1977, the floodgates burst wide open. Everyone from major studios to scrappy B-movie producers tried to cash in on George Lucas's galaxy-sized phenomenon. Some results were disasters better left forgotten. But others? They carved out their own weird, colorful, and surprisingly entertaining legacy. So, which of these so-called rip-offs are actually worth your time? Let's take a ride through the strangest corners of sci-fi cinema history. Star Crash, 1978. If Star Wars was the carefully polished crown jewel of space opera, Star Crash was the wild knockoff toy you'd find at a flea market, cheap, shiny, and absolutely irresistible. Made in Italy less than a year after A New Hope exploded at the box office, Star Crash didn't just borrow the formula. It ran off with the recipe, tossed in some flamboyant costuming, and delivered pure B-movie madness. Directed by Luigi Cozzi, a filmmaker known for turning tight budgets into glorious chaos, Star Crash tells the tale of intergalactic smuggler Stella Star and her partner Acton. Think Han Solo and Luke Skywalker had a strange friendship? Wait until you see Acton's glowing lights and future-telling powers that make no sense whatsoever. The story is a roller coaster of cliches, evil counts, space battles, Amazon warrior planets, but it's delivered with such unshakable enthusiasm that you can't help but grin. And the cast? A fever dream lineup? Caroline Munro, dressed in costumes that look like they were designed by a disco fashion student, is pure charisma. Legendary actor Christopher Plummer, yes, that Christopher Plummer, plays the Emperor like he's reciting Shakespeare in space. And a young David Hasselhoff shows up, laser sword in hand, just to make sure you're paying attention. But here's the kicker. The special effects, while laughable next to Lucas's industrial light and magic, have their own charm. The stop-motion robots, glittering starfields, and wobbly space stations feel like a child's toy box brought to life. It's messy, it's loud, and it never takes itself too seriously. That's what makes it special. Watching Star Crash is like opening a time capsule of pure 1970s sci-fi optimism. It's not about being perfect, it's about capturing the joy of adventure, even on a shoestring budget. And honestly, sometimes that's more fun than polished perfection. The Black Hole, 1979. Now, you probably wouldn't expect Disney, the house of Mickey Mouse and fairy tales, to jump on the Star Wars bandwagon. But by the late 70s, Disney was in trouble. Their animated films were struggling, their live-action output was fading, and executives were desperate to grab some of that sci-fi cash. The result? The Black Hole, a movie that feels like Disney stumbled into a horror film wearing a space helmet. At first glance, it looks like a family-friendly adventure. A crew, aboard the USS Palomino, stumbles across a massive black hole and a long-lost ship orbiting near it. That ship is controlled by Dr. Hans Reinhardt, a scientist whose genius is only matched by his unsettling obsession. Played with delicious menace by Maximilian Schell, Reinhardt is basically Captain Nemo transplanted into outer space, and his plan is nothing less than piloting his vessel straight into the black hole itself. But what really sets the black hole apart is its mood. This isn't the cheerful escapism of Star Wars. This is gothic, eerie, and often downright terrifying. The ship is full of faceless robots who march like stormtroopers but act more like a nightmare army. Anthony Perkins meets a shockingly grim fate, a reminder that this was no ordinary Disney adventure. And then there's Maximilian, the terrifying, blood-red robot bodyguard whose spinning blade hands have haunted kids' dreams for decades. When the movie finally dives into the black hole, reality bends into a feverish mix of hellish visions and heavenly redemption. It's psychedelic, it's bizarre, and it feels closer to 2001, a space odyssey than anything in Disney's usual playbook. Critics didn't know what to make of it. Audiences were divided, but decades later, its cult following has only grown. Sure, the black hole is uneven. It shifts between goofy robot sidekicks and philosophical musings on life and death. But that unpredictability is exactly why it's fascinating. It's Disney at its weirdest, proving that even family studios can stumble into the abyss and come out with something unforgettable. Battle Beyond the Stars, 1980. Roger Corman was the king of cheap knockoffs. If a blockbuster hit big, you could bet Corman would have his own version in theaters before the popcorn cooled. But with Battle Beyond the Stars, he didn't just recycle ideas, he accidentally created one of the most charming sci-fi adventures of the 80s. The setup is simple, but it works. A peaceful farming planet is under threat from an intergalactic tyrant named Sator, played by the wonderfully sinister John Saxon. The farmers have no defenses, so they recruit a ragtag group of mercenaries to help them fight back. Sound familiar? It should. It's essentially Seven Samurai in space, the same story that inspired the Magnificent Seven, and of course, influenced Star Wars itself. This time, though, it's a straight-up Star Wars of its own. What makes this movie special isn't just the plot, it's the insane amount of talent behind it. The script came from John Sayles, who later became a respected indie filmmaker. The score was composed by James Horner, who would go on to score Titanic and Aliens. And the young production designer responsible for the special effects? None other than James Cameron before he made Terminator. Even on a tight budget, their creativity shines. The movie bursts with weird, colorful characters, a lizard-like alien with a noble spirit, a pair of telepathic twins, a buxom warrior named Saint X-Men, and of course, Robert Vaughn as a mercenary basically replaying his role from the Magnificent Seven. The special effects are surprisingly slick for a Corman film, with model ships that feel like they were built with real love. Is it corny? Absolutely, but it's the kind of corny that wins you over. Battle Beyond the Stars doesn't hide what it is. It embraces its B-movie roots and delivers an adventure that feels fun, earnest, and even a little ahead of its time. If you've ever wondered what would happen if the scrappy underdogs of cinema tried to make their own Star Wars, this is the answer, and it's a blast. The Man Who Saved the World, 1982. Better known to fans as Turkish Star Wars, this one doesn't just rip off Star Wars, it literally steals from it. Yes, actual footage from George Lucas's 1977 masterpiece is spliced directly into this Turkish production, alongside music from Indiana Jones. And somehow it gets even stranger from there. The plot follows two space pilots who crash land on a desert planet. There, they encounter an evil wizard who wants to take over the universe, naturally. To stop him, the heroes must train in bizarre, laugh-out-loud montages, fight armies of mummies and monsters, and eventually wield weapons made out of literal cardboard. At one point, the main character uses giant foam rocks strapped to his legs as weapons. That's the level of chaos we're dealing with here. Culturally, this movie is fascinating. Turkey's film industry in the early 80s didn't have the resources of Hollywood, so filmmakers often borrowed footage and music from foreign hits to build their stories. What could have been a lazy cash-in ends up as something so audaciously weird, it circles back around into pure entertainment. The lead, Cüneyt Arkın, gives it everything he has, performing death-defying stunts with a straight face, even when surrounded by monsters that look like they wandered off a high school play stage. The editing is frantic, the special effects are bargain bin, and yet there's a certain fearless charm to it. This wasn't made with cynicism. It was made with the sheer determination to deliver a Star Wars-style adventure, no matter how impossible that was with the budget. Fans around the world now treat Turkish Star Wars like a cult treasure. It's one of those films that has to be seen to be believed. Is it good? Not really. But is it worth watching? Absolutely. Few rip-offs capture the phrase, "so bad it's good," with as much chaotic energy as this one. Krull, 1983. Now here's a twist. Not every Star Wars rip-off is a straight space opera. Krull decided to mash up the futuristic feel of sci-fi with the medieval vibe of fantasy, creating a hybrid that's as fascinating as it is flawed. On paper, it should have been the next big thing. In execution, it became a cult oddity. The story centers on Prince Colwyn, a young hero whose bride is kidnapped by alien invaders called the Slayers. To rescue her, he assembles a band of allies and sets off on a quest across a strange world filled with shapeshifters, cyclopes, and magical castles that literally teleport from place to place. If Lord of the Rings met Star Wars in a smoky 80s bar, Krull would be their strange, moody offspring. What set it apart was its attempt to create an iconic weapon of its own, the glaive, a star-shaped throwing blade that looked like it belonged in every kid's toy chest. The glaive was supposed to be Krull's answer to the lightsaber, and while it never became that big, it did lodge itself into the imaginations of fans who saw the film in theaters. Even decades later, the glaive is remembered as one of the coolest movie weapons of the 80s. The movie was expensive for its time, boasting elaborate sets, inventive creature effects, and a swelling orchestral score by James Horner. Unfortunately, critics and audiences didn't know what to make of its strange blend of fairy tale quest and outer space menace. It bombed at the box office. But time has been kind. Today, Krull enjoys cult status. It's weird, yes, but also beautiful. There's a sincerity to it, a willingness to dream big even when the execution stumbles. If you're tired of slick, predictable sci-fi, Krull is a reminder that sometimes the strangest experiments leave the deepest mark. You're the Hunter from the Future, 1983. Few films wear their absurdity as proudly as You're the Hunter from the Future. At first glance, it looks like just another caveman adventure flick, the kind of thing you'd expect to see at a drive-in double feature. But stick with it, and you'll realize it's not just about cavemen. It's secretly a post-apocalyptic sci-fi romp that cranks the weirdness to 11. Based on an Argentine comic, You're opens with the blonde, muscular hero striding across barren landscapes in a loincloth, looking like a knockoff Conan. He wrestles dinosaurs, rescues damsels, and seems like he's trapped in the Stone Age. Then, in one of the most gloriously unhinged twists in B-movie history, the curtain gets pulled back. The world isn't prehistoric at all. It's a future wasteland where civilization collapsed, leaving pockets of primitive tribes and, wait for it, evil overlords commanding robot armies. And yes, the villain, simply called the Overlord, is an obvious riff on Emperor Palpatine. He has the same raspy menace, the same hooded aesthetic, and an army of androids that look like discount stormtroopers. Released the same year as Return of the Jedi, the similarities are impossible to miss. But here's the thing, You're doesn't apologize for any of it. It goes full throttle with its insanity. At one point, You're kills a giant flying dinosaur and uses its body as a hang glider. Later, he's battling laser-firing robots inside a fortress that looks like a rejected Star Wars set. Every scene feels like it was dreamed up by a kid smashing action figures, together on the living room floor, and that's exactly what makes it fun. The theme song, Yours World, only adds to the madness. It's the kind of cheesy anthem that gets stuck in your head and refuses to leave, punctuating the film's already over-the-top vibe. Sure, it's silly, but it's the right kind of silly, the kind that makes you laugh, cheer, and wonder how something this bonkers actually made it to theaters. You're is a cult classic for fans who embrace nonsense with open arms. It's not polished, it's not smart, but it's endlessly entertaining. Sometimes that's all you need. The Last Starfighter, 1984. If you were a kid in the 80s, The Last Starfighter was the ultimate dream scenario. Imagine playing your favorite arcade game only to discover it was actually a secret training program to recruit star pilots in a galactic war. That's the genius premise that makes this movie stand out, not just as a Star Wars imitator, but as a sci-fi gem in its own right. The story follows Alex Rogan, a teenager stuck in a dead-end trailer park. His only escape comes from obsessively playing a video game called Starfighter. One night, after setting a record score, he's whisked away by a mysterious alien named Centauri, who reveals the game was a test. Alex isn't just good at video games, he's been recruited to join an interstellar defense force battling an evil empire. If Star Wars tapped into the mythic farm boy becomes a hero narrative, The Last Starfighter gave it a modern, relatable update. Instead of a galaxy far, far away, it starts with a kid who could be your neighbor. Instead of destiny, it's skill and determination that launch him into adventure. That grounding is what made the movie resonate with a generation raised on arcades and Atari. And then there are the effects. While the spaceships lack the tactile realism of Star Wars models, The Last Starfighter broke ground as one of the first films to use CGI extensively. The digital battle sequences may look primitive now, but in 1984, they were jaw-dropping. They paved the way for the digital revolution that would transform Hollywood in the decades to come. The cast also elevates the material. Dan O'Herlihy as Grig, Alex's lizard-faced co-pilot, delivers warmth and humor in every scene. Their friendship gives the film heart, making the battles more than just explosions on screen. It might not have been a box office giant, but The Last Starfighter endures because it tapped directly into youthful fantasy. Who hasn't dreamed that their hobby, their passion, could turn out to be the key to saving the universe? For every kid who pumped quarters into an arcade machine, this movie made that fantasy feel possible. Masters of the Universe, 1987. By the mid-'80s, Star Wars mania had shifted into toy aisles. Action figures ruled, Saturday morning cartoons sold product lines, and few franchises were bigger than He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. So naturally, Canon Films, the notorious low-budget studio known for big dreams and tiny wallets, decided to turn it into a Star Wars-style epic. The result? Masters of the Universe, a film that's gloriously messy but packed with bizarre delights. The plot follows He-Man, played by Dolph Lundgren in all his muscle-bound glory, as he battles Skeletor, the cackling skull-faced villain who craves ultimate power. On paper, it's classic pulp adventure. But instead of keeping the story on the fantasy world of Eternia, the filmmakers made the baffling decision to set most of it on suburban Earth. Yes, the heroes and villains tumble through a cosmic portal and spend much of the movie running around strip malls and back alleys. That choice frustrated fans at the time who expected epic castles and alien landscapes. But decades later, the film has grown into a cult classic precisely because of its odd choices. Frank Langella as Skeletor steals the show. He hams it up with Shakespearean intensity, delivering monologues as if he's gunning for an Oscar, all while buried under prosthetics. His performance alone makes the movie worth revisiting. The film's production was infamously chaotic. Canon slashed the budget halfway through, leaving unfinished effects and abrupt storytelling shortcuts. And yet, despite all that, there's an undeniable charm. The costumes, the cheesy laser battles, the synth-heavy score, they all scream 1980s sci-fi excess. At the end of the day, Masters of the Universe isn't good in the traditional sense, but like many Star Wars ripoffs, it's endlessly watchable. It swings for the fences, misses spectacularly, and somehow still manages to entertain. Sometimes failure is more fun than success, and this movie is Exhibit A. Flash Gordon, 1980. If Star Wars was sleek, modern, and mythic, Flash Gordon was its flamboyant, neon-soaked cousin that refused to be subtle. The irony? George Lucas actually wanted to make a Flash Gordon movie before creating Star Wars. When he couldn't secure the rights, he invented his own galaxy instead. So when Star Wars exploded, producers rushed to revive Flash Gordon, only this time the tone was pure camp. From the opening moments, this movie doesn't hide what it is. It's loud, it's colorful, and it's gloriously over the top. Sam J. Jones stars as Flash, the clean-cut football hero who gets whisked into outer space and forced to save Earth from Ming the Merciless, played with oily delight by Max von Sydow. Everything about Ming screams exaggerated pulp villainy, flowing robes, sinister sneers, and a throne room so gaudy it makes Jabba's palace look modest. But what truly sets Flash Gordon apart is its style. The production design is a kaleidoscope of bright colors, glittering costumes, and absurdly elaborate sets. It doesn't try to be realistic like Star Wars. Instead, it leans hard into the retro pulp serial roots of the 1930s. Critics in 1980 thought it was too silly compared to Lucas's slick universe. Today, that silliness is exactly what makes it magical. And then there's the soundtrack. Queen, yes, that Queen, composed and performed the film's score, delivering one of the most iconic rock soundtracks in movie history. Even if you've never seen the film, you've probably heard Freddie Mercury belting, "Flash! Ah!" It injects the movie with an energy no orchestra could match. Time has been very kind to Flash Gordon. What once seemed corny now feels like a joyous celebration of sci-fi excess. It may not have shaped a generation the way Star Wars did, but it's become a cult favorite, beloved for its unapologetic camp, its legendary soundtrack, and its sheer confidence in being weird. In a galaxy of ripoffs, Flash Gordon stands tall as a ripoff that earned its own legend. Message from Space 1978. When Star Wars fever swept across the globe, Japan wasn't going to be left out of the fun. Enter Message from Space, Toei Studios' attempt to build their own galactic epic. And make no mistake, this one wears its Star Wars influence on its sleeve. Laser battles, ragtag heroes, a looming evil empire. Sound familiar? Yet the movie also carries the distinct flair of Japanese sci-fi, creating something that feels both familiar and completely unique. The plot kicks off with an oppressed planet under the thumb of the cruel Gavana's empire. The desperate people launch glowing seeds into space, seeking champions to help free them. Those seeds eventually land in the hands of Earthlings and misfits who must rise to the occasion and fight back. If that sounds like a mystical spin on Obi-Wan's call to adventure, that's no coincidence. Where Message from Space sets itself apart is in its sheer inventiveness. The film boasts elaborate sets, eccentric costumes, and space battles that, while clearly chasing Star Wars spectacle, add a wild Japanese twist. The visuals feel closer to a tokusatsu series, imagine Power Rangers crossed with Star Wars, and that gives it a pulpy, colorful charm. The cast is an eclectic mix. You've got Sonny Chiba, a martial arts legend, lending serious gravitas. You've got goofy comic relief, and you've got villains who seem ripped straight from kabuki theater in their dramatic style. The tone swings wildly from epic to absurd, but that's part of its charm. It doesn't care about being smooth, it just wants to entertain. In Japan, it made a splash and even influenced later anime and manga that blended space opera with fantasy. Internationally, it never caught on the same way, overshadowed by Lucas's Juggernaut. But in retrospect, Message from Space is worth seeking out. It's like watching Star Wars after it's been filtered through Japanese genre traditions, creating a fascinating cultural remix. If you've ever wondered what Star Wars might look like if it were made by Toei instead of Lucasfilm, this is your answer. It's chaotic, it's colorful, and it's strangely captivating. Space Hunter, Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, 1983. With a title like Space Hunter, Adventures in the Forbidden Zone, you'd expect pulpy thrills, and that's exactly what you get. Released in 1983, this Canadian-American co-production was Columbia Pictures' attempt to cash in on the Star Wars craze, but also to surf another rising wave, the 3D revival. Audiences were promised laser battles and alien creatures popping right out of the screen, and while the gimmick faded fast, the movie itself turned into a cult curiosity. The setup feels ripped straight from the Star Wars playbook. Wolf, a grizzled space adventurer played by Peter Strauss, crash lands on a desolate planet while searching for 3 kidnapped Earth women. Along the way, he teams up with Nikki, a scrappy teenager played by a very young Molly Ringwald, years before she became a Brat Pack icon. Their bickering, reluctant partnership mirrors the roguish charm of Han Solo and his tag-alongs, but with its own quirky energy. The villain? Overdog. Yes, Overdog. Played by Michael Ironside, he's a grotesque half-machine warlord who rules the planet's wasteland with an iron fist. Imagine Darth Vader if he'd been cobbled together with scrap metal and pure malice. His twisted design, complete with mechanical claws, gives the film a nightmarish edge that sets it apart from other knockoffs. What really sells Space Hunter is its grimy Mad Max in space aesthetic. Instead of sleek starships and pristine uniforms, everything looks battered, dirty, and lived in. The Forbidden Zone is crawling with mutants, scavengers, and bizarre tribes, making every step of the adventure feel dangerous. That raw, down and dirty energy keeps the film lively even when the story stumbles. Critics panned it at the time, dismissing it as another shallow Star Wars wannabe. But fans of cult cinema have kept it alive, appreciating its weird villains, practical effects, and Molly Ringwald's endearing sass. It's not polished, but it doesn't need to be. Space Hunter is the kind of movie you stumble upon late at night and can't turn off simply because it's too strange to look away from. Star Chaser, The Legend of Orin, 1985. If there's one Star Wars ripoff that feels both shameless and strangely ahead of its time, it's Star Chaser, The Legend of Orin. Marketed as the first full-length animated feature in 3D, this film set out to give kids a Star Wars-like thrill ride with an animated twist. What we got was equal parts knockoff and cult curiosity, with just enough weirdness to make it worth revisiting. The story begins underground, where a young miner named Orin discovers a mysterious sword hilt that projects a glowing blade of energy. Sound familiar? It should. It's basically a lightsaber. The discovery sparks his journey out of slavery and into the wider galaxy, where he faces off against the evil overlord Zygon. Yes, even the villain feels like a mix of Vader and Palpatine. On the surface, Star Chaser seems like an outright copycat, but what makes it fascinating is how it pushes boundaries. Unlike most kids' cartoons of the time, it doesn't shy away from darker themes: slavery, betrayal, loss, and war. The animation may look dated now, but back in 1985, the 3D effects were ambitious. Spaceships soared, lasers popped, and audiences got a glimpse of how animation could try to rival live-action spectacle. There are also flashes of real creativity. Orin's journey introduces him to a cast of quirky allies, including Dag, a cocky smuggler who is basically a Han Solo clone, but charming nonetheless. The universe itself feels expansive, with strange planets, robot armies, and a gritty underworld that set it apart from Saturday morning cartoons. Did it wow critics? Not really. Many dismissed it as a cartoon Star Wars clone, but over time fans have come to appreciate its boldness. It may not be perfect, but it dared to mix sci-fi and animation in a way that paved the path for future projects. In hindsight, it feels like a rough draft of what Japanese anime would soon do better, blending epic sci-fi with animated imagination. Star Chaser isn't just a ripoff, it's a window into a forgotten moment when filmmakers asked, why can't animation compete with live-action blockbusters? The result was flawed but fascinating, a Star War of its own, just drawn with ink and neon. Ewoks, The Battle for Endor, 1985 TV movie. When Star Wars officially wrapped up its original trilogy in 1983, you might think the galaxy far, far away was done for a while. But no, Lucasfilm wasn't about to let go of merchandising gold. Enter the Ewok TV movies made for Sunday night family viewing. The second one, Ewoks. The Battle for Endor is a bizarre mashup that feels like a Star Wars spin-off trying to imitate itself, and yet it's oddly watchable. The story is surprisingly dark for what was meant to be family-friendly entertainment. A young girl named Sindel loses her entire family in the opening minutes, leaving her stranded on Endor with the fuzzy Ewoks. Together they must defend their home from marauding space raiders led by the villainous Tarek and his sorceress ally, Sharal. Unlike the playful Ewoks in Return of the Jedi, here they're thrust into a story that's part fantasy quest, part sci-fi adventure, and part straight-up survival. What makes Battle for Endor stand out is its odd tonal mix. On one hand, you've got cuddly creatures waddling around in furry costumes. On the other, you've got darker themes of loss, destruction, and an evil army marching across forests and villages. It's almost as if Lucasfilm wanted to test how far they could stretch the Star Wars brand while still marketing it to kids. The production values are better than you'd expect for a TV movie. The forests of Endor are atmospheric, the villains have a menacing presence, and the action sequences, though scaled down, feel surprisingly ambitious. The addition of Wilford Brimley as a grumpy hermit who helps Sindel gives the film a grounded human touch that works better than it should. While it doesn't hold a candle to the main saga, Battle for Endor has gained cult appreciation. Fans who grew up with it remember it fondly as their first brush with a darker Star Wars tale. It's proof that even a made-for-TV offshoot, leaning hard on fantasy tropes, could still deliver something memorable. Is it a ripoff? Technically, it's Lucasfilm ripping off itself, but it checks every box. Recycled ideas, mythic structure, cuddly heroes, evil villains, and a desperate battle for survival. And somehow, it works. So here's the truth. Star Wars didn't just inspire a generation. It unleashed a wave of imitators, wannabes, and low-budget dreams. Some crashed and burned, others soared against all odds, and a few carved their own unique place in sci-fi history. From Italian knockoffs to Disney oddities, from cartoon adventures to 3D experiments, these rip-offs prove one thing. You don't need Lucas-level polish to create pure entertainment. Which of these would you actually sit down and watch? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and remember, sometimes the best galaxies are the ones built out of pure imitation.